on last week's episode of Grid Tonight, we discussed the rumours about Alpine giving Esteban Ocon a one-race suspension for the contact with teammate Pierre Gasly during the Monaco Grand Prix. Now, Ocon didn't get benched for the Canadian Grand Prix, but Alpine announced they are parting ways with him at the end of the 2024 season. He said Alpine will always be a special place, remembering the great moments and tough moments they've had together. Also, additionally to that as well, don't forget, is that it has been announced today that Jack Doohan will be taking Esteban Ocon's place in free practice 1 for the Canadian Grand Prix. That is in no way as a punishment for what happened in Monaco. The team saying it is a scheduled plan to have Doohan race in practice 1. In other news, Sergio Pérez has signed a 2-year contract extension with Red Bull. Despite being under so much pressure for underperforming compared to teammate Max Verstappen in the last few years, Checo can breathe for now with his seat secure heading into 2025. The photo and graphic courtesy there of Alpine and Red Bull. Kobe's back with us as well. We'll start with you on this one. Do you think Monaco was the final straw for Ocon, which led Alpine to bring this decision to move on from him? And did Red Bull make the right call to bring Perez back on a brand new 2-year deal?
Well, I think the situation in Monaco certainly didn't help things. I had a feeling, that this was probably a decision about Ocon that had been brewing in the background for the longest time. As we said on last week's show and previous shows, everyone who's in tune to Formula One knows that Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly have been longtime rivals, and they don't like each other all and not getting along and all of that. And Ocon obviously frustrated in team management there, and this is the decision that they made. I'm not surprised at all after the situation in Monaco when we were talking about the possibility of them suspending Ocon. We were all thinking if Ocon gets banned from the Canadian Grand Prix, there's no chance he's coming back in 2025 because that's going to be a bridge burn and the relationship will be damaged beyond repair. And I guess that although they didn't suspend him for Canada, it seemed like that relationship, already been strained, and it's probably in the best interest for both parties to mutually part ways here. And we'll see what's happening with Esteban Ocon in the future. And it's an interesting decision for Red Bull to resign Sergio Perez. I'm sure Checo is going to be very happy for the rest of this season because he knows he's not going to be driving for his job essentially every single week. Yeah, Sergio Perez has definitely been a good teammate to Max Verstappen. Although sometimes Perez doesn't really show the performance that he needs in the constructor standings, but certainly he poses no challenge to Max Verstappen. I'm sure that's really going to keep Max happy moving forward. I also wonder what this means for the likes of Yuki Tsunoda, who it seems like has never really come up in talks about potentially going to Red Bull, about Daniel Ricciardo, who returned to Formula One in hopes of potentially getting promoted back to the Red Bull senior team, and that's not going to happen now. And then you got Liam Lawson waiting in the wings, who could potentially take one of those seats next year, potentially replacing Ricciardo or Tsunoda. I just think that moving forward, the Formula One silly season driver market is going to be very intriguing as in the coming weeks and months ahead.
God bless the silly season, because if there wasn't a silly season, it would have been a very, very dull week, wouldn't it, in both two-wheel and four-wheel. Ocon, as you say, Kobe, we talked about it last week. What were they going to do? There was the whole rumour of the benching him for this weekend in Canada coming up, or not renewing. You can read the statement from Ocon two ways, really. Has he decided to leave, or has he been asked not to resign? Or have they, taken the option not to re-sign him, even though he wants to stay? But he's going to be out at the end of the season. A lot of conjecture about the Doohan thing, as Josh said. This has been scheduled in for a long time. Of course, Jack's never driven the racetrack, and whereas when he was doing F2, he would have been doing all the European tracks. So this gives him some track experience as well. And he's probably in sort of head of the line, unless we have even more craziness in the silly season, to take that seat alongside the yet to be re-signed Pierre Gasly at Alpine. So watch that space of interest. Esteban Ocon, of course, personally managed by Toto Wolff. I'm sure Toto would have said to Esteban, "Don't worry, I'll look after you." Whether that means he's going to be with George Russell at Mercedes and being at Brackley next season or not, we'll have to wait and see. The Red Bull Young Driver Program. it's just not a thing, is it? Because they've re-signed Sergio Pérez with probably what's going to be his final F1 contract, much like we talked about with Lewis Hamilton when he signed for Ferrari at the start of the year. This is more than likely going to be Perez's last deal, 2 years. Just to keep Max Verstappen happy, maybe you should think, because we know Adrian Newey is on his way out or almost left. He's got like two toes left in the building of his feet going out the door. And what can we do to keep Max happy? Let's re-sign his teammate that he soundly beats 9 times out of 10 every weekend and over the course of the season. But you have to feel sorry for Yuki Tsunoda, who's been one of the stars of the season for me, and he's not going to get that much lauded promotion, which is what the Red Bull Young Driver Program has been all about. Liam Lawson, of course, waiting in the wings. What's going to happen to him now? Lots of things up in the air in Red Bull land off the back of this announcement. And maybe, as we talked about before we went on the air, maybe this could be Tsunoda's chance to jump ship and go somewhere else.
Even worse, because I've heard in the break is that Danny Ricciardo is expected to have another 2-year deal with Alpha Tauri, Red Bull, Racing Bulls, whatever they're called now.
Yeah.
So
It's a Cash App RB.
team, that's the one.
Cash
So the
out.
team that is designed to be for young drivers is going to have a 30-something-year-old who raced for them 10 years ago, had a 5-year deal with the other team, who's now racing for them again after being dropped by another legendary team. What on earth is Danny Ricciardo doing? I mean, what is Red Bull doing? Red Bull are in such a mess right now that it's not even self-destructing. They're just going around massacring each other randomly. It doesn't make sense. Honestly, Tsunoda and Larson at RB, Verstappen and Perez. I don't even know why Perez is there. In my opinion, it should be Verstappen alongside Tsunoda at Red Bull. I think Tsunoda's done enough this year. And it should be Lawson alongside somebody else at RB. If we have to keep Ricciardo, put Ricciardo in there. Because I think Lawson desperately deserves that seat. And I can't see why it's not happening. And I think you're right. Tsunoda is probably going to jump ship. I said earlier on, Williams looks like it's going to go the way of Schumacher because they need to put him somewhere. And James Vowles wants that Mercedes Sweeties. So I think Schumacher's going to go there alongside Albon to replace Sargent. And then looking down the line thinking, well, Alonso's not going to be at Aston Martin for long. They're not going to get rid of Lance Stroll as much as we all want him to go. So if Alonso retires at the end of 26, then I can see Tsunoda jumping in there quite nicely because it would be Honda at Aston Martin, and Honda and Yuki are like that. So it kind of makes sense that Tsunoda would go there to replace Alonso. And I don't know, unless Stroll leaves and does his WEC thing with Aston Martin, that's it. That's how I see it going.
Something else I've heard, and I'll just read Gastrol's comment actually before I do. He says Lawson's Super Formula run was special. It was. I'd like to see him on the grid in 25. And even when he came in last year, of course, and replaced Daniel when he had the hand injury, did a great job in the races that he did, score points.
Race 1 passed Max Verstappen in the WEC, his home race, for position.
Yeah, absolutely right. And then ended up scoring a couple of points. Was it Singapore? I think he scored some points as well, didn't he? So had a really good run. You mentioned Stroll. Here's a completely off the boil thing. Will Lawrence Stroll bail out of Aston Martin and then it become Honda? Like a full Honda team? I know they've obviously just built a new factory and they're pumping in loads of money. Then he'll get Yuki to partner Fernando. But that's pie in the sky thinking. What I was going to say was the Red Bull Junior program. You go back a little while, we had, back in the day, when we had DC and Webber in the main team, Vettel, Buemi, John-Eric Verne, Jaime Alguersuari, Scott Speed, Daniel Kvyat, Brendan Hartley, all these young drivers that came through the program as it was designed to do. Last year in Formula 2, we had 6 Red Bull coloured cars. Where have they all gone? And they're not going to go anywhere further forward.
Get Isaac Hadjar in. I think Hadjar's done enough.
Hadjar, yeah.
Do you know another driver that I think deserves a seat? If we're talking about Formula 2, I think I describe. I don't know if I said it in the Grid Network chat or said it in the JB Motorsport chat, but to me, Toto Wolff, it's like literally that meme of the guy's got the girlfriend, the pretty girl goes by, and he goes like that.
Oh, yeah.
To me, yeah, Toto Wolff always reminds me a bit of Hugh Hefner. He's very happy with the beautiful lady until another beautiful lady comes along, because he was obsessed with Hamilton. Then he was obsessed with Valtteri. Then he was obsessed with Russell. He dropped Valtteri for Russell. Then he dropped Russell for Antonelli. And it's just going by. Paul Aron was a part of the Mercedes Driver Academy in Formula 2. And they dropped him at the end of 2023. And Aron has he's funding himself in Formula 2 this year. And he is absolutely epic. We need him in a Red Bull Driver Academy or a Williams Driver Academy or Ferrari. He deserves a seat in Formula 1. And honestly, he's right up there. And I think as well, you've got Behrman coming in at Haas alongside Magnussen. Hulkenberg's off to Sauber. Zhou Guanyu, who I think has had a poor... He's failed to get a Q1 every time this year, bar sprint races. But Zhou's going. He won't be there because I think Sainz will end up alongside Hulkenberg at Sauber next year before it becomes Audi. So the silly season is just getting more and more. And we're talking about silly season about drivers who aren't good enough anymore, hogging the seats for the youngsters. So the problem with F1 at the moment is, one, there's not enough seats, cue the Andretti drama. Two, we have drivers who are staying in Formula 1 because they're paying for it. Three, you've got drivers then, like especially Lance Stroll, who's doing interviews saying, oh, well, the only good thing about Formula 1 is that you can't pay to get in. The people in Formula 1 deserve to be there because you can't pay your way up the ranks.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Pinocchio. And then you've got great drivers in F2 and F3 coming up the ranks who are just stalling and losing. And it's killing me. It really is.
Wilson, Pourchaire, Drugovic, to name three over the last couple of years. And the next one that will be on that list, and it's unfortunate, and he should be getting to Formula 1, is Zane Maloney.
Yeah, Zane is Red Bull, and he should be in that Alpha, whatever, Manardi, whatever you want to call it. He should be in that Racing Bulls team, and isn't. So I'm gonna ask a surprise question here. What is one driver from the grid this year that will be a surprise that won't be on the grid next year? Who do you think won't make the cut? That's a very good one. So take your time. And I'm going to say the driver from this year's grid who won't be on the grid next year, that will be a surprise to everybody. I'm going to say we're not going to see Lance Stroll. Something's going to happen there because of Honda.
It's a good shout. I feel like it's either going to be a Stroll, maybe Stroll, but maybe even Daniel, Rick. Maybe they will just have if this slump in form continues. And he's basically he did the sprint well in Miami, didn't he? Got a decent result off the back of a good qualifying, but was terrible in the Grand Prix. Or not terrible, back to normal in the Grand Prix, let's put it that way. And hasn't really performed otherwise since. So my tip would go to Daniel. Kobe, have you got anyone in mind?
Yeah, actually two in mind. First one, Esteban Ocon, another one, Yuki Tsunoda. I have a feeling that one of them could be left out, but not permanently. Maybe for a season or two. I know Ocon doesn't want to go through that again because he's already been through that once, where he was left without a seat and had to sit out and wait. You're just looking at the Formula 1 driver market for 2025 is just very unpredictable right now. So anything could happen. And there's, like you say, Mick Schumacher, Josh, former F1 driver, trying to make it back. A lot of great talent in Formula 2, deserving of a promotion as well. And you never know, although highly unlikely, maybe a Formula 1 team is looking at an IndyCar driver who's performing extremely well.
Leading on to a perfect story, doesn't it, as well, for our hot topic this evening as well. I think, Joe, if you're watching, we need a round table about F1 2025. Do you have any, Astral says, do you all have any fears or concerns with the 26 regulations? Not really.
Come back to me tomorrow when I've seen them.
Yeah. My only concern is that they've been designed by a man who has now been employed by a team which isn't in Formula One. That if gets to Formula One for 2026 will have a massive advantage because we've got Pat Simmons now, who's technical director at Andretti, who don't have an F1 team, but he's gone there without having to do any gardening leave and knows everything because he's designed the regulations.
Andretti, the next Brawn.
They will be. And that, I think, is why everybody is scared. And honestly, if I'm right, also, did we mention about Alpine basically self-destructing? Do you know they've sacked another driver? Sorry, they've sacked another member. They've sacked another member of their team. Yeah.
Yes, I saw that. I believe I put that in our group chat. Maybe it was a few days ago, a week ago. Yeah, I saw that, and I believe I said, Alpine's musical, the revolving door at Alpine continues, something like that. It's just crazy seeing how there's so much turmoil and dysfunction happen inside the organization.
If I was Michael Andretti, I'll get down to Alpine quick in Enstone and just go, I'll have it for £2. Thank you very much. And I'll keep the 2 employees as well. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Because Alpine are sinking fast. And I think there's a few others actually that are.